What happens when a black kitchen worker is fired for feeding two hungry kids behind a country club? 16 years later, a helicopter lands in her yard, and what unfolds leaves the whole neighborhood speechless. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. It was a quiet Wednesday morning in early October when the roar of a low-flying helicopter shattered the usual calm of Brookstone Hills, a quiet suburb tucked against the edge of the Blue Ridge foothills. The noise stirred neighbors from their breakfast tables and office calls, pulling them out onto porches and lawns in confusion. That I in a modest single-story brick home at the end of Pineview Lane, 47-year-old Lauren Mason stood frozen at her kitchen sink, suds still clinging to her fingers. Her hands stopped scrubbing the breakfast pan as she turned her face slowly toward the window. Outside, the large black helicopter circled once, then began to descend, right into her front yard. Her heart skipped. She blinked rapidly, unable to make sense of the surreal image unfolding before her. Within seconds, the aircraft's skids touched grass. Wind gusted up, whipping golden leaves through the air and flattening the long grass. She hadn't yet had time to mow this fall. The engine whirred as the doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. Two figures stepped out. The first was a man in a sharp slate gray suit, tall, poised, unmistakably successful. His crisp white shirt gleamed in the morning sun. Beside him stood a young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, wearing a tailored navy coat. She walked with a calm, confident stride, yet her eyes shimmered with something far more emotional. They began walking directly toward the front door. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. Her dish towel slipped from her hands. There was something eerily familiar about their silhouettes. The man's proud posture, the woman's warm but searching gaze. Her heart began to pound, not with fear, but with a strange anticipation. Something deep in her soul stirred. By the time she reached the door, the two visitors were already standing just a step away, waiting patiently. For a few long seconds, none of them said a word. Then the man spoke, his voice low and gentle. "Miss Mason," he said, smiling faintly. "Do you remember us?" Lauren stared at him, stunned. And then suddenly, she did. The lines of their faces, the kindness in their eyes, the way the young woman tilted her head slightly to the left, just like she had all those years ago. A trembling hand came to Lauren's mouth. Her eyes flooded with tears. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Eli, Kaya." And just like that, time collapsed. The years peeled away like faded wallpaper, revealing a memory so sharp it made her chest ache. Two children, filthy, shivering, curled beneath a heat vent behind the kitchen of the club, one maybe 11, the other no older than 9. She'd never forget them. No matter how many years had passed, she pulled them both into a fierce hug. "I could never forget you," she whispered. They embraced tightly, holding each other for a long, quiet moment that felt like the past had finally exhaled. Inside, she brewed a fresh pot of tea, her hands slightly trembling as she arranged cups on the old wooden table in the living room. Everything in the house was familiar, small, worn, but tidy, like Lauren herself. The mismatched chairs, the faded quilt over the sofa arm, the framed photo of her late mother above the fireplace. She set the mugs down and finally sat across from them, still unable to fully believe they were real. "You've grown into everything I hoped for," she said, voice cracking. "Everything you deserve to be." Kaya smiled warmly, her hand brushing against Lauren's across the table. "It's all because of you." Lauren swallowed the lump in her throat. She thought she had buried that winter deep enough that it couldn't hurt her anymore. But sitting across from the children, no, the young adults, she'd once fought so hard to protect. The memories came flooding back. 16 years ago, she had been 29, working late nights in the kitchen of the Ridgeview Private Golf Club, a place dripping with white-gloved service and generational wealth. While silver spoons clinked against porcelain upstairs, she scrubbed dishes and peeled potatoes in the basement-level kitchen, her worn sneakers soaked through and her back aching. It was one of those nights, just after a charity banquet, when she first saw them. The back door had creaked slightly, enough to make her glance up. And there they were, two children crouched by the industrial dumpsters, their clothes hanging off their bones, faces hollow and terrified. She had stepped out slowly, careful not to startle them. "What are you doing here?" she had asked softly. "We're hungry," the boy said simply, his arm protectively around the girl. Lauren didn't think. She acted. She snuck back inside, filled a takeout container with leftover bread, warm chicken, and soup, and brought it to them. They looked at her like she was made of starlight. From that night on, she brought food every shift, wrapped sandwiches, warm stew, even coats left behind and lost and found. Eventually, they told her their names: Elijah, 11, and Kaya, 9, orphaned in a crash, living behind an abandoned gas station nearby. She made a silent promise that first week, they would not go hungry again. But kindness, she would soon learn, could be punished. Lauren never intended to break rules. She simply refused to break her heart. Every night after that first encounter, she prepared extra portions in secret, setting them aside in plastic containers and slipping out the back door when the head chef was distracted. She'd leave food and bottled water behind the utility shed, wrapped in napkins or bags to stay warm. A makeshift ritual born out of conscience. The children never begged, never complained. They were always polite, always cautious. Elijah would nod with quiet gratitude, and Kaya, sweet, shy Kaya, would whisper, "Thank you," in a voice so small it made Lauren want to cry. Their bond grew silently. She began bringing old scarves, socks, anything she could spare. Sometimes, she stayed a few minutes longer just to talk. They told her about their parents, both killed in a fire when their rented house went up in flames. They'd bounced between shelters before ending up on the street, afraid of being separated by the foster system. Lauren listened without judgment, without asking why no one had found them yet. All she knew was that these children had no one, and somehow they'd found her. But kindness is a fragile thing in places built on power, and Ridgeview was such a place. The club was owned by Edgar Stanwyck, a towering man with silver hair, icy blue eyes, and a voice like a gavel. A retired CEO turned philanthropist, Stanwyck was worshipped in local business circles and reviled in whispers by those who worked beneath him. Especially people like Lauren, that he was known for his exacting standards and subtle contempt. Always smiling for the donors, always sneering behind the kitchen door, he didn't know Lauren by name. To him, she was just another brown-skinned woman in a uniform. Invisible, replaceable, until one night, she became very visible. It was mid-December. Snow had blanketed the Ridgeview grounds, and the club buzzed with preparations for the annual Winter Gala, Stanwyck's prized event, full of senators, judges, and old money elites. Lauren had worked a double shift, elbows deep in soapy water, her body begging for rest. After the event, while others toasted champagne upstairs, Lauren quietly slipped outside to leave a warm meal near the back fence. But this time, Stanwyck saw her. She turned and found him standing under the kitchen floodlight, wrapped in his custom black wool coat, eyes narrowed and filled with disdain. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snapped. Stepping forward, Lauren's heart jumped. She looked down and saw Elijah and Kaya frozen behind her, their thin jackets pulled tightly around them. Elijah instinctively stepped in front of his sister. "I asked you a question," Stanwyck barked. Lauren stood straighter, heart pounding. "They were hungry, sir. I was just feeding vagrants on my property," he spat. "You've brought street rats on a club grounds? Have you lost your mind?" "They're children," she said, voice trembling. "They've got no one. And this is a private facility," he cut in, voice rising. "Not a soup kitchen. Not a damn shelter. You're trespassing, aiding vagrants, and stealing club resources." "I didn't steal anything," Lauren whispered. "I used leftovers. Do you think that makes it better?" His tone turned cruel. "You used food meant for guests. You've broken policy. You've broken trust." She felt her breath catch. She tried to speak again, but he raised his hand sharply. "You're fired." Immediately, the children gasped behind her. Lauren froze. The other kitchen staff began filtering out the back door, drawn by the noise. Stanwyck made no effort to lower his voice. "This woman," he said, gesturing toward her like she was a stain, "has been stealing and smuggling in outsiders. Her access is revoked. Permanently." People stared. No one spoke. Even the head chef averted his eyes. Lauren's face burned with humiliation. Her apron felt like a shackle around her waist. Stanwyck leaned closer, his words now cold and deliberate. "You people think kindness makes you noble. It just makes you reckless." Then he turned and strode off into the snow. Lauren stood in silence as the door slammed behind him. The children clung to her legs, terrified that they had ruined everything. She dropped to her knees and wrapped them in her arms, holding them tightly. "It's okay," she whispered, even though it wasn't. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. Not even close. The next day, word spread like wildfire. Staff whispered that she'd been caught stealing food, that she had endangered the club, that she'd invited troublemakers onto the grounds. Stanwyck made sure the rumors stuck by the end of the week. Lauren had been blacklisted. Her name circulated quietly among employers. Unreliable, untrustworthy, disruptive. She didn't even know why her job applications were being rejected until a line cook from Ridgeview pulled her aside and said, "They're saying you took food for yourself, that you were fired for theft." Stanwyck's people made the calls. Her stomach dropped. Every door that had once opened, even the low-paying ones, now stayed firmly shut. She tried to fight it. She showed references, brought proof of clean records, begged for interviews. Nothing worked. For weeks, she sat by her mother's hospital bed, a woman slowly fading from diabetes complications, trying to hide her fear, trying to act like everything would be okay. But she had no money and no job, and 2 children still sleeping in alleys, waiting for her each night. Lauren wept in silence every time she passed the Ridgeview gates on the bus. The place where her life had shattered. The place where kindness had cost her everything. The winter deepened, and so did the silence around Lauren Mason. By the time January rolled in, she was a ghost to the world she once belonged to, barely visible, barely surviving. Every morning, she slipped out of her tiny apartment before sunrise, wrapped in her fraying coat, her breath fogging in the icy air. Her hands were cracked and raw from cleaning stairwells and office bathrooms at a janitorial company that paid under the table. She didn't complain. She couldn't afford to date night. She passed Ridgeview from a distance, her gaze lingering not on the glowing chandeliers or manicured greens, but on the back alley that once held warmth and purpose, where 2 hungry children had waited for her each evening like clockwork. But one night, they were gone. She waited until the streetlights blinked on, then waited longer. She walked the block, calling softly. Nothing. No quiet rustling. No cautious footsteps. No soft, familiar voices. Panic crept in. She checked nearby alleys. Then a local playground. Then the overpass where they'd once said they hid from the cold. Nothing. Finally, an elderly man she vaguely recognized from the neighborhood approached with a grocery bag in hand. "You looking for those 2 kids?" he asked gently. Lauren turned quickly. "Yes. Elijah and Kaya." He nodded solemnly. "I saw social workers pick him up yesterday. Someone must have tipped them off. They got taken to a center down in Redford, I think." Lauren's stomach turned to stone. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, the cold seeping through her shoes, through her skin, through her bones. All the air seemed to vanish from the street. The children she'd protected, her only remaining link to something good, had been taken. That night, she returned to her apartment and found her mother asleep in the hospital bed in the corner, her breathing shallow, her face pale and drawn. Lauren dropped to her knees beside her, unable to hold it in any longer. "I lost them, Mama," she whispered. "They're gone. I tried everything. I swear I did." Her voice cracked. "I don't have a job. No one will hire me. I clean toilets at night and eat 1 meal a day. And now, I can't even protect the only 2 people who ever needed me." Her mother stirred faintly, eyelids fluttering open. Her hand, frail and paper-thin, reached for Lauren's and gave it a light squeeze. "Baby," she murmured, "don't let pain define you." Lauren clutched her hand tightly. "But it's all I have now." "No," her mother said, her voice like a breeze. "You still have your truth. Your heart. They can't take that." She coughed softly, her chest rising with effort. "Promise me," she said, eyes locking with Lauren's. "Promise you won't give up. You'll turn all this into something bigger, something better." Tears streamed down Lauren's cheeks as she leaned forward. "I promise." Her mother smiled, soft and tired, and drifted back to sleep. 3 nights later, she passed away in her sleep. Lauren held her hand until the last breath left her body, and long after. The hospital was kind enough to let her stay the night. The next morning, she packed her mother's belongings into 2 small bags. Among them was a worn cardboard box, yellowed with age. Inside it, wrapped in a silk scarf, she found an old business card with the name Clifford R. Ellison, attorney at law. She remembered that name. Her mother's childhood friend, someone she hadn't seen in over a decade. She didn't know why she kept the card, but at that moment, it felt like a thread worth tugging. She called the number. To her surprise, he answered on the third ring. An hour later, they met in a modest cafe downtown, its windows fogged from the cold. Clifford was in his 60s now, silver-haired and soft-spoken, but still sharp as a scalpel. When she introduced herself, his expression shifted, surprise, then recognition, then a quiet sorrow. "I was so sorry to hear about Rosa," he said. Lauren nodded, her voice tight. "She always spoke highly of you." They sat, and slowly, over cups of bitter coffee, she told him everything, not just the firing, but the humiliation, the rumors, the jobs lost, the children, the blacklisting, the lies. She didn't embellish. She didn't cry. She simply told the truth, and when she was done, she reached into her worn satchel and placed a folder on the table. "I've been cleaning offices for over a year now," she said. "And I've seen things, left open on desks, in trash bins, overheard conversations." Clifford opened the folder. Inside were scanned payroll reports showing racial disparities, internal emails leaked from Ridgeview management, and even a blurry voice memo of Stanwyck speaking about keeping help under control. Clifford looked up, stunned. "Lauren, this is evidence." "I didn't know what to do with it, but I knew it had to mean something." His face grew serious. This could destroy him. Lauren leaned back in her chair. "I don't want revenge," she said softly, "but I want the truth to matter again." Clifford nodded slowly, his hands resting on the folder. "Then we'll make it matter." Clifford didn't waste time. Within a week, he had assembled a team: a young legal assistant with a sharp mind for document trails, a retired auditor from the city's ethics commission, and a freelance journalist known for exposing corruption in high places. They met quietly in Clifford's small office every evening, poring over Lauren's collection of files. It turned out what she had was more than useful. It was explosive. Internal communications from Ridgeview's upper management referenced reputation risk tied to unsupervised staff and need for visual uniformity when hiring. Payroll records revealed white employees at every level earning significantly more than their Black or Hispanic counterparts, even in identical roles. One file showed the club had intentionally destroyed surveillance footage related to an incident involving staff, dated just 2 days after Lauren's firing. And then there was the voice memo, Stanwyck, speaking with another board member, dismissing a former worker as one of those people, and laughing that a little humiliation keeps them in line. Clifford's expression hardened as he replayed it. This isn't just moral rot. It's legal liability. Lauren sat across the table, her fingers clenched tightly around a ceramic mug of now-cold coffee. "Will it be enough?" she asked. "It'll be more than enough," Clifford replied. "If we do this right." They spent weeks building what he called a bulletproof case. Each night they worked late, Lauren helping to organize documents and transcribe key audio. The deeper they dug, the clearer the picture became. Ridgeview wasn't just complicit. It operated on a silent, systemic cruelty that had remained unchallenged for decades. And at the center of it all was Edgar Stanwyck, untouchable. Untouchable until now. One night, Clifford arrived with a copy of an industry newsletter in his hands. "Look at this," he said, dropping it on the table. "Stanwyck's about to sign a major land deal with the state, something that'll expand Ridgeview and give them a major tax exemption." Lauren's eyes narrowed. "And if that deal falls through?" Clifford smiled. "Then the club's finances collapse. That's where we strike." The next day, the team compiled a sealed dossier and delivered it to the State Ethics Board, the Department of Labor, and, most importantly, a veteran reporter at the Richmond Observer. Clifford had called in every favor he had to ensure the reporter would listen. They did more than listen. 3 days later, headlines lit up screens across Virginia. Inside Ridgeview: racism, retaliation, and the fall of a philanthropic type. The exposé was brutal. It laid out everything: the hiring disparities, the audio clip, the destruction of internal footage, and the retaliatory blacklisting of a former employee who had dared to feed 2 homeless children. Lauren's name was kept anonymous, for now, at her request. But the name that was everywhere? Edgar Stanwyck. The very next morning, state investigators raided Ridgeview's financial offices. Stanwyck wasn't there. He was in New York, meeting with investors for the land deal. But word traveled fast that by evening, The deal was dead. Lauren watched it all unfold on her small TV in the corner of her apartment, sitting in the same chair where her mother used to rest. Clifford called just after sunset. "They've frozen his personal assets," he said, "and the board has launched an internal review." Lauren didn't speak for a moment. She just listened. "It's happening," she whispered finally. "It's really happening." Clifford's voice was warm. "And it's because of you." But Lauren didn't smile. Not yet. There was still too much weight in her chest. The next day, The Observer published a follow-up. This time, they revealed Lauren's identity, her story, the children, the food, the firing, the smear campaign, was told in full, with her consent. They even published a photo of her at 29, taken by a coworker during her last week at Ridgeview. The article spread like wildfire. Messages poured in. People she hadn't spoken to in years reached out. Former Ridgeview employees came forward, validating her account and sharing their own stories of racial mistreatment. The club's elite image cracked, and Stanwyck? He remained silent for a week. Then came the press conference. He stood in front of a wall of microphones, looking tired, his silver hair more disheveled than usual. He read a prepared statement, denying personal wrongdoing but announcing his resignation for the good of Ridgeview and its future. There was no apology. Lauren didn't expect one, but something in her finally exhaled that day. Something clenched for too long. That evening, as she sat again in Clifford's office, her phone buzzed with a call from a blocked number. She almost didn't answer, but then she did. The voice on the other end was familiar, older, shakier, but unmistakable. "Miss Mason." She froze. "Mr. Stanwyck." A long silence. "I assume you've seen what they're saying," he said quietly. "I have," Lauren replied. "I just want to understand," his voice faltered. "Why? After all these years?" She stared out the office window into the night. "Because I remember what you said to me that night," she said. "You people think kindness makes you noble. It just makes you reckless." Another pause. "I was wrong," he said. "Yes, you were." He didn't reply. Lauren's voice was calm. "I didn't do this for revenge. I did it so no one else has to go through what I did." More silence. Then, faintly, "I suppose that makes you the better person." Lauren exhaled. "No, Mr. Stanwyck. It just makes me the one who finally told the truth." She ended the call, and for the first time in 16 years, she felt whole. It was a warm afternoon in early spring when the knock came at the door. Lauren Mason had just finished sorting a box of documents from the pro bono legal clinic she'd begun volunteering at after everything happened. She wiped her hands on her jeans and moved to answer, thinking it might be a neighbor or the mailman. But when she opened the door, she stopped breathing. Two young adults stood there, smiling. A man, tall and poised, wearing a navy suit and an air of confidence that spoke of hard-earned dignity. Beside him, a woman in a soft lavender blouse, radiant and elegant, her brown curls tucked behind one ear. For a moment, Lauren didn't speak. Then her lips parted. "Elijah?" The man's smile widened. "It's me, Miss Lauren. And this is Kaya." Lauren staggered back a step, hand to her chest. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Kaya stepped forward and embraced her tightly, whispering, "We found you." Lauren folded her arms around her, then pulled Elijah into the embrace. She couldn't stop crying, not from sadness, but from the pure, overwhelming joy of recognition, of reunion. Inside, over tea and laughter and trembling hands, the memories came rushing back. Kaya, now a law school graduate working with a civil rights nonprofit. Elijah, the founder of a community cafe chain that trains and employs youth from vulnerable neighborhoods. "We looked for you for years," Elijah said. "We didn't know your full name back then, or what had happened. But after your story came out in the press, we knew immediately." Kaya nodded, eyes misty. "We remembered everything. The food, the scarf, your voice, the way you looked at us like we mattered." Lauren shook her head slowly. "I thought I'd lost you forever." "You didn't," Elijah said. "You saved us. And now we're here because we want to give something back." They told her they had already begun forming a foundation, one focused on systemic injustice, community aid, and outreach. But they didn't want to do it without her. "We want you to help us lead it," Kaya said. "Not just in name, but in mission." Lauren stared at them, speechless. Kaya reached across the table, taking her hand. "You taught us what real kindness is," she said. "What quiet strength looks like. We want to build something in your honor." a place where no one like us has to feel invisible again. Tears rolled freely down Lauren's cheeks. Let's do it, she whispered. Months passed. The Mason Elijah Foundation quickly became a name whispered in state offices, college campuses, and corporate boardrooms. It began with local projects, literacy centers, community food banks, legal aid clinics, and grew to national initiatives. Lauren, once a janitor silenced by lies, now stood on stages across the country, not as a victim, but as a founder. One autumn afternoon, she gave the keynote speech at a major equality summit in D.C. Her voice was steady, her words unwavering. I was told my kindness made me weak. But kindness is not weakness. It is defiance. It is resilience. It is the spark that outlives cruelty. In the crowd that day, among CEOs and senators, sat a man alone in the back row, Edgar Stanwyck, older now, thinner, faded. When Lauren finished and the audience erupted in applause, he did not clap, but he did stand. And as she exited the stage, their eyes met for a brief moment. He gave a small nod, not seeking forgiveness, but acknowledging defeat. Lauren didn't smile. She simply walked on. That winter, in a bright new office overlooking a city skyline, Lauren sat with Elijah and Kaya, watching children run and laugh in the after-school center they'd helped build. They look like we used to, Kaya said softly. No, Lauren replied, her voice warm. They look like what we dreamed of. Elijah leaned forward, placing a photo frame on the table, a picture of the three of them in her kitchen from that first reunion. In the corner, a quote was printed, "Kindness isn't weakness. It's a revolution in slow motion." Lauren smiled and whispered, "Let's keep it going." Years later, people would forget the name Edgar Stanwyck. But in classrooms, clinics, and homes across the country, the legacy of Lauren Mason, the woman who once gave soup to two lost children behind a country club, would remain etched in hearts, not for the battles she won, but for the lives she helped grow.